Hello everyone, so today we're going to be working on Metal Earth's Deadpool model. This one was actually one of my first kind of complex one that I finished, and I remember after I finished this I was actually very happy about it. And as you can see here, it's actually medium to hard difficulty, and I do believe that it is, especially if you haven't done any of those kind of human types of models, especially with the head and a lot of these curvatures and wedges that you're going to be creating. It is a very difficult model if you haven't done these types yet. As you can see here, this is actually a 3.5 sheet model, and yeah, actually the sheets here are a little bit shorter because they're more square, but it has kind of a matte finish with the color, which I think looks really great. So I wanted to show kind of this is what the part list looks like, and as you can see, you're gonna see 4 sheets A, B, C, D with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the numbers, it's not like some other models where you have A1 and then B1. It's actually just 1 through whatever the number it is, and so it's just easier to locate where it is because you can reference the sheet also. And if you are working on this, you're going to look at the manual and see what part to use. So it'll say like sheet B part 61 or part A, I don't know, 51. So when you do, you just use a wire snipper and just kind of get in between where the triangle piece is kind of connecting the piece to the sheet, and you just kind of snip it very easily with a wire snipper to get the parts out of the sheet. Now there are a lot of curvatures in this model, and I was actually using these pliers that actually helps crimp it down into like a arch, but I actually think that is unnecessary for these models. If you just have like different rods that you can use in different like diameters or circumferences, that's all you kind of really need. Like the step one that I have here that you see is actually used for jewelry. It's supposed to be like ring making. There's a lot of different tools out there, or you can get like a dapping block set where you have all these different rods with a spearhead, because you will be kind of using the spearhead for some of these Metal Earth models, and you have the varying thicknesses of rods, so it's kind of a 2-for-1 with those dapping blocks. They're kind of expensive, but I think it's kind of worth it if you do a lot of these Metal Earth models, and especially the more complex model, which kind of has more curvature pieces to them. I actually bought this fondant making set also, just for the smaller curvatures. This is before I bought my dapping block, but either one should be fine. Like this crimping stage is actually not necessary. You can just use a kind of a wider rod diameter and just press around it to kind of make your curvature shape. I kind of did this 2-step thing before where I would use like a kind of a round plier or something to kind of make that initial shape and then kind of go in with the rod. But I actually nowadays I just use a rod to make the shape right off the bat, because I was always afraid of overstraining it or over bending it, but that's really occurred for these curvatures. And if you over curve it by a little bit, that's actually fine, because it actually helps keep it in shape as you kind of pull the curvature a little bit wider afterwards. It actually holds your circular shape a little better if you over curve it just a little bit. So please watch out for these 2 tabs that you need to kind of poke out 90 degrees. This was actually my second model that I was making, and the first time I did not realize it, and I closed off the gun, which made it very difficult for me to actually have those 2 tabs sticking out. So in this case, and it shows in the model, except that unfortunately you don't really see it very well in the manual, just because it's kind of this 2 like red slots, and a lot of times, unless you're kind of studying the manual like with a microscope or something, you will kind of notice these details a lot. So kind of make sure to read the manual and read it again just in case, so you don't miss these things like I did. And I actually suffered a lot with my first model, where actually I had to undo some of the bends from the gun, and when that happened, some pieces snapped off, so I had to glue it together. So in this case, I actually had it be a cleaner finish just because I knew that was coming. And you're going to have a few pieces along this model where those you're gonna have to bend those kind of tabs 90 degrees to have it stick out. You're gonna have a few on the belly, kind of abdomen area. You're gonna have 2 on the shoulders, and I'm pretty sure there's one more. I think on the legs. where you're gonna have like a little dagger holster, you're gonna be adding that one on too. So there are a few spots to watch out for. A fair warning, there are a lot of parts where you're supposed to actually close off these cylindrical shapes or conal shapes later, but I keep making the mistake of closing it off early, so it actually was a little bit harder for me to kind of put the pieces in together afterwards. What you're actually supposed to do is kind of fit the pieces in first and then close off the tab afterwards, kind of like what I'm doing here, where I'm actually putting the pieces of the die to the calf kind of like together, and then at the end I'm going to close out that last cylindrical shape. But there are a lot of times in this video you're going to see where I'm actually doing it out of sequence, and normally I would tell you, you know, sometimes you want to do it out of sequence because it makes it easier, but it actually took me more time and it actually set me up for potential failure. I did not actually screw up this time, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand. Just follow the manual sometimes with these things, because there is a reason why they put it in that sequence, but you know, just use your best judgment, because there are certain areas where you might want to break out of the sequence if it just makes things easier. There are sometimes where they want you to bend the piece later on, which just doesn't make sense because you have harder access to it, and it's really hard to tell until you build the model. So unless you're going to build multiple the same model, it's kind of hard to know ahead of time when what the better sequence is for a lot of these models. Make sure to have these like utility holders that's going on the die. When you're attaching it to that kind of belt piece, make sure you're bending it down 90 degrees and crimping it as close as possible to the actual sheet, because this will be going over the die, and if it's bulging out a little bit, it may be actually hard to wrap it around the leg and closing it off afterwards, because you know it's actually a perfect size for the belt that you don't have too much of a flex to have it be loose. So this is actually another prime example of where I kind of did out of sequence, and I should have just done it kind of per sequence, because I actually read this wrong. So you're supposed to kind of do the calf first, and then kind of where that knee joint is meeting, you're supposed to wrap it around the round plate first and then close it off afterwards. But I actually ended up doing all of the calf at one piece and close it all off. And so when I was trying to attach the plate, the round plate right here, I actually ended up having a lot of trouble fitting it all in, because it's a really tight fit that I actually had to kind of pre-bend some of the tabs down. So if you want to kind of avoid having a headache, just make sure that that kind of top portion of the calf, where it's actually like the knee, where it meets the knee, don't close that off yet until you put in the knee into the calf area and you wrap it around. I won't lie, this kind of dagger poster piece is actually pretty difficult, just because there's a lot of these small bends, and even with my plier right around the handle there, I had a hard time trying to bend it 90 degrees perfectly, just because I was running out of space as I was bending the plier, because you don't really have a lot of room to reach in sometimes. So try to use the thinnest plier that you have. If you like, tweezers won't work, because the tweezers are actually not sturdy enough to actually bend the sheet metal, so you would want to have to use a plier. But you can try using like the plier that I'm using right now, where it's a very narrow edge. Or one thing that I've noticed later on that I thought helped a lot was actually just using a metal ruler, and just, because the thickness of the metal ruler is very thin, and it's actually great piece to use to leverage the metal pieces, where you're putting it on one of the corners of the metal rulers and you're kind of just bending it down over the ruler. So that actually was a little trick that I discovered later on. So this was a perfect example of where I actually made the curvature a little bit more than the diameter that I needed, but just for that reason, when I'm kind of stretching it out a little bit, it's kind of like not in tension, but it does kind of want it to close back in, so you kind of get a tighter curvature edge when you're attaching it to the base piece. So this kind of piece here is a little tricky because you're going to be kind of curving it in two different directions. In the manual, it kind of just shows to curve it like horizontally, but in the back side where kind of the butt would be, they actually want you to kind of curve it up and down also. And then also you're going to be curving kind of like the crotch area so that they close in on itself on the underside. So this is kind of a tricky piece. You know, you just have to be patient and just kind of work slowly at a time until you get the kind of right shape. And this is kind of where having like different rods or like a kind of a dapping block set would help, just to kind of make the shape a lot easier. So the manual here actually suggests you to just bend the tab 90 degrees to secure the leg in place, but I actually found it easier to just twist it, and since it's actually not in a visible area and it's not going to be in the way of anything, it didn't really matter if you bend it or twisted it. I think they wanted you to bend it 90 degrees just so that when you bend something, when you bend these tabs in, you actually close the gap between the two pieces a little bit more. But in this case, it was really not noticeable even if you twisted it instead. With kind of this waist torso area, one thing that you can just do is make it into kind of a nice cylinder shape. You don't have to worry about making it too oval yet, because what you can do is actually just make it into a circle or like a cylindrical shape, and then kind of just after it's closed off, you can pull on both sides of it so that you can kind of make your oval shape that way. Just in case the manual was not clear, the three tabs in front, the middle one is actually going to be bending inwards towards the body, and then the two on the front that are on both sides of the middle one, they're going to be sticking out because those two tabs are going to be the one that's going to be attaching the utility belt. So this is another area where I closed off this kind of waist area and then attached it. But it actually would be easier if you didn't close it off and you had it wrapped from the inside in. And then once you get all the tabs attaching from the waist to the kind of what do you call it, the torso area, then you can kind of close off this one piece. But I did it the other way around, but it wasn't too bad just because like I was able to kind of squeeze it in without detrimenting the sheet metal too much. Pro tip: if you have some of these tabs that are kind of visible that you kind of want to hide as much as possible, you can kind of use these. This one was a gold Sharpie because the belt was gold and the color was similar enough that I was able to use it, and it makes the tab blend in. Sometimes I would use a black Sharpie, or you can actually get oil-based markers. And so Sharpie has some too, but you can get some generic ones on Amazon for cheaper, and they have a variety of colors. And it looks kind of like the whiteout pens where you shake it a lot, and then you kind of press down on the tip for the paint to come out. And you have different colors, and since it's oil-based, it actually works pretty well with the sheet metal models. With the chest piece, you are going to have three different curves, the two kind of side rib area and then like the main chest piece. And so you're going to create the three different curvatures, and then you're going to have the two kind of tabs on like one on each armpit area that you're going to be fitting in so that you can kind of get the chest piece all together into one shape. So obviously the way I've been kind of attaching these tabs, I've been trying to hide as many tabs as I can by usually having the tabs go into a part where I can crimp it and hide it. But an easier way to make these models, if you're not too worried about the tabs sticking out or how it looks, is have it bend the other way so that you just have the tabs sticking out and you just put the hole through that tab and you just bending it down 90 degrees. Only downside to that is that you will see those tabs and you're going to kind of see the silver, the aluminum kind of color of the tab in a lot of places. It's just that to do a lot of these hidden tabs, it is a lot more difficult to do that if you're not too worried about it or you just want to get more practice, I would say just don't worry about hiding all the tabs in the beginning. Your first few Metal Earth models are not going to look perfect, but as you develop more confidence and more skills, then you can start doing these kind of hidden tab pieces. For the back, I wasn't too worried about hiding those two tabs because I knew that I was gonna have the two swords sticking out through his back, or actually on his back, so that tab would not be shown much at all. So I wasn't too worried about trying to get that perfect hidden tab. So sometimes you can still look at an area and be like, no one's gonna ever see this area, so let's not worry too much about how it looks. This is where having a very thin profile edge of a plier really helps, because you have to sometimes get in between these holes to reach the tab to twist or bend. And a lot of times I'm not too worried about making the perfect shape right away, because I know that it's going to be deformed as I'm working on the metal and especially attaching the tabs together. But so afterwards I'll always reshape it after I get the tabs connected. So as you saw earlier with the neck piece too, I kind of used the rod to press up against different portions of the sheet metal to make the neck more round, because before it was more of an oval shape and it looked very narrow. So for the arm, the best way to describe this is that you're going to be creating kind of two cylindrical shapes that are kind of cut off at an angle on both sides. And so once you get these two cylindrical shapes, you're going to be actually just folding it kind of 90 degrees in half so that the two tabs will go into like the bicep area. And then, then you get the kind of 90-degree arm folded kind of look. I know the hand can look a little daunting, but in reality, you're just kind of bending the palm into like a U shape, and then you're just bending the fingers down, and you can kind of follow the side of the hand to know what angle you need to kind of bend the fingers down. And so in reality, it's actually really easy to make these hands. So a lot of these wrist pieces, or like you sometimes get this kind of circle shape with these two strips on either side sticking out, and they're supposed to be like half circles that you're supposed to make and then bend it upwards. In the manual, it tells you to attach the circle piece first before bending or curving the two pieces and then building it up. And the R2D2 model actually has a lot of these pieces. And what I've noticed actually makes it easier is to actually bend the curvatures first using like a rod, and then you can attach the pieces on and close the tab off or twisting it, and then you can bend the two strips up in 90 degrees to kind of close off the cylindrical shape. I just thought it was kind of weird that they make you do the curvature afterwards, which is kind of harder to do, especially with the tabs in the way. I won't lie, this unicorn that looked pretty simple actually took a lot longer than I wanted it to, just because of all the different bends. You're gonna have a lot of these kind of micro bends in this unicorn piece, and you can actually look at the unicorn side piece to kind of know what the bends and what the angles and where you need to kind of bend. There are score marks on that strip to tell you where to bend it, but they don't tell you how much to bend, so using the kind of side profile as a guide actually helps a lot. So this is very similar to the right arm, except that the angle of the bend for the arm is actually not as much. So the other one was more like a 90-degree pose, while this one's probably going to be more of a, I don't know, 15 degree. So it's still, the arm is a little straight. The hand for this one is actually the same step, except the only thing is after you build the hand, the thumb portion you actually want to bend upwards to have a very good clearance, because you will be actually fitting a unicorn through his hand, but the gap between his hand and his thumb and his index finger is very narrow, so you have to actually bend it out 90 degrees so that you can kind of fit the unicorn in, and then you're going to bend the thumb over the unicorn afterwards so that he's actually grasping onto the unicorn. These samurai swords are actually not too hard to put together, but the only caution that I would advise is when you're putting on the plate, the backside right here, just be aware of the orientation of the plate. You will see on the manual that it says not exposed or NE, but that might be confusing sometimes, but they will point to which side's the not exposed or not colored side. And so in this case, you know, you're actually closing it off so that it actually has a print or color around the whole sword. It's just that sometimes with these manuals, it might be confusing because you're like, okay, I see that I'm supposed to attach this so that the non-exposed part or the non-colored part is supposed to stick out. So just be careful of that when you look at the manual. Just kind of look at which side you're pointing at and look at the orientation of the piece to make sure that you're kind of looking at it the same way the manual is. I actually don't do heads this way anymore, where I'm actually kind of rolling it out, kind of like how you're pretty much kind of warping the metal as you're kind of pressing down on the spearhead. I do still use the spearhead piece, But instead of doing this, I would actually hold it kind of like if I don't know if you've ever kind of made ribbons before, where you kind of get a scissor and you kind of just roll the scissor along the flat side of the ribbon, and when you do, it curls up. It's kind of the same thing with the spearheaded like dapping block or like this fondant tool. I would actually hold the head in one piece, and then I'll kind of do that same motion where I'm kind of pressing the piece between my thumb and the spearhead, and then I'll kind of just slightly curve it as I go along. I found that was more efficient and more accurate than trying to press down and kind of warp the metal into the curvature shape. After I do make the all the wedge pieces into one head, I do like going back with the spearhead and kind of pressing along where the seams of the edges are, because that would actually make it a little bit rounder and flatten out, because sometimes you'll get a kind of sharp angle along all those wedges. So pressing up against it with the spearhead actually allows you to kind of smooth it out and kind of have the transition between the two edges a little bit smoother, so that it seems a little bit more seamless. For the bottom portion of the face, you're actually kind of just curving it kind of into like a U shape, and then kind of where the nose bridge is, you're kind of just bending it out on one side, and then you're gonna, right where the nose ridge will be, you're bending it back towards in, so it kind of creates like a ridge line. Other than that, you just have to make sure that the tabs were kind of in the right position, so that when you put the two headpieces together, it'll fit right in, and then you can close it off afterwards. So it seems a lot more complicated than it actually is, and the manual doesn't help to clear up that confusion. So I hope that like when you're watching this video, it kind of at least helps understand what you're supposed to do versus what the manual is trying to show you how to do it. So this is kind of the reason why I'm making these videos a lot of times, is so that there are a lot of times where with this manual, you're so stuck to this isometric kind of confinement that sometimes they'll tell you to close a tab, but all the pieces are behind, so it's kind of behind a silhouette, and it's kind of grayed out, so you don't really understand that step was there, because you're stuck with this kind of one orientation for this model. So hopefully this video helps understand, like, oh, okay, so that's what they want me to do, or oh, I didn't actually realize that I was supposed to do that because the manual wasn't clear on that. As we're kind of wrapping up this model now, I just have to do the shoulder pads and then attach the head to the neck. I just wanted to kind of give us overall summary. This model was really great. I think the finished product looks really great, and Metal Earth has come a long ways from their first original models to like all these complex models now, because it seems more fleshed out. There's definitely more skills involved with the designs now, and I just think like they did such a great job of being ingenuous to how to make these look nice and not make it look too jaggedy, or not make it look so out of proportion that it doesn't even look like what it's intending to be. And I just think that especially with these later models, they've become more and more complex, so kind of the enjoyment I had before kind of did disappear just a little bit, because I felt like before I can finish a model in like 4 hours, maybe to 6 hours, and now like these models are taking anywhere between like 12 hours to like sometimes 18 hours. Like I kind of do want to go back to the simple ones, but every time I see a finished product like this Deadpool model, I just think it looks so great that it keeps me going and keeps me doing more and more and more. I just wish there was a better balance for myself, at least, about doing some simple ones and some more complex ones. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you did, please hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I've actually noticed that when I was just looking at analytics, I don't really care for it too much, but at the same time I noticed that I think it was like 98% of the people watching this video are not subscribed, and I think that's kind of amazing. Like I can actually get that many unsubscribers to watch in general, So if you enjoy watching these videos and want to see more, please hit that subscribe button and make sure to follow up to see when I post new videos.